Greetings, CRC planners. It is February, which means it is Black History Month, and this has been a month of incredible reading. And so I wanted to share with you 5 books that I read this month that have just made this a great month of books. So first off, the book I wanted to share with you is Gabrielle Union's We're Gonna Need More Wine. Now, I love Gabrielle Union. I just think she's delightful. And when I heard she wrote a memoir, I was intrigued to read it. And last month I was in Johannesburg, in South Africa generally, actually, for a trip. And I thought it would be a great vacation read. And so I tried to find this book in lots of bookstores across the country. But whether I was in an airport in Johannesburg or an airport in Cape Town or just a random bookshop in between the two cities, this book was just sold out everywhere. And so as soon as I came back to Canada, I ran to the local library and put it on hold. And the book didn't disappoint. It is filled with stories about what it was like really to be on set in various Hollywood films that Gabrielle Union has made. She also talked about marriage, she talked about miscarriage, she talked about pregnancy, she talked about raising Black sons, she spoke about what it was like to grow up Black and white spaces, what it was like to try and navigate Black spaces, what it was like to code switch, how Hollywood has a long way to go before it can really call itself telling diverse stories. It's kind of a book that has everything: romance, critical analysis, laughter, honesty, vulnerability. It feels like having a conversation with a really good friend. And I just loved it, and it was wonderful, and I highly recommend. So that was number 1, We're Gonna Need More Wine. The second book is called What We Lose by Zinzi Clemens. I hadn't heard of this book beforehand. I found it in a local library, and when I opened it, it had a description of Sandton, which is a part of Johannesburg that I've been to before, and her description really captured the essence, I guess, of the place, or what, at least it captured a sense of what Sandton is. And that got me intrigued, and so I opened up another part of the book, and it was describing a South African suburb. And then I realized that this book is about a character from 2 places. She grows up in America, but she also visits South Africa quite often, every summer, I think. And the author is someone who also has that. She has one parent who's South African, one parent who's American, and she navigates both spaces. And this book, I would call it plotless fiction, which, if you've been to Type Bookstores, Type Books in Toronto is a category in their bookstore. Because the book starts off and you realize the main character has lost her mother. And the book is about her navigating her relationship with her mother. You know, at some point her mom is going to die, but it doesn't happen right away. And it's her navigating femininity, her identity, the place she lives, love, lots of different things. And it has kind of an unusual structure because there'll be kind of a plot point, and then it will just be the main character meditating for a while, then there'll be a line of poetry. If you follow my blog, I did a podcast episode recently about Sheila Heti's book Motherhood. It kind of has a similar feel to it, although not exactly, but it reminded me of that book. So really lovely, unexpected find, and a really good read. The third book is called Well Read Black Girl by the blog and Instagram channel of the same name, neither of which I followed before reading this book. Now I definitely do. This book felt like a feast. It felt like a banquet. It's an anthology of different writers describing what stories have meant to them, what books have meant to them, what writing has meant to them. And the book really feels like a very good friend guiding you through incredible literature. Some of the authors I knew, so Tahari Jones writes an essay in here called The Author of American Marriage. Morgan Jerkins writes an essay in here, and her memoir is called This Will Be My Undoing. But most of the authors I actually hadn't heard of. And what this book does is there might be an essay, say, about science fiction, and then there is 2 pages of, other science fiction books that you could read. Or there's an essay about poetry, and then there's all these poetry collections you could read. And at the back of the book, there's actually a wonderful list of all the books that are mentioned in the various essays, whether by Black authors or not. This book is just delightful. And the curator of the anthology, Gloria Eden, has, in her bio at the back, she says that she's a literary advocate. And it really, that word and term really resonated with me, and I thought, that's what CFC planning is also all about. So I got this from the local library, strongly considering buying my own collection because it was just a really delightful book. So highly recommend. I also read it on a plane, and so if you're looking for a travel book, recommend this one. The fourth book is called I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in an Age of Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. I hadn't heard of this book before, but this month I started a podcast called The Good Ancestor Podcast by Layla Saad. I think there's 4 or 5 episodes out. I've heard 2 of them, and the second episode is by the author of this book, Austin Channing Brown. And in that book, or in that episode rather, in her interview, she talks about being a bridge builder, about being an equity educator, and how at some point she realized that she was a bridge builder, but the bridge was her broken back, and what it means to do work that doesn't center Black women and the impact of that. And I got goosebumps in my kitchen as I was hearing that, and then ran again to the local library. There's a common theme to these stories to place a hold on the book. And this book, it's sharp, it's incisive, it's honest, it's vulnerable. It's really incredible. She's Christian as well, and I hadn't read a book by a Black woman who's American, who's Christian, that's a memoir before, and so I just really appreciated her perspective. I loved her talking about what it's like to navigate workplaces, what it's like to actually get work, what it's like to navigate microaggressions on a daily basis. And if you are trying to be, a co-conspirator, this is a really good book. I learned a lot. I had tabs all down the side by the time I was done this book, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Also made me think about how BIPOC is a really bad category. So BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, Person of Color, is often just a really big category used to describe lots of different people. But this book was a reminder that those are really different experiences. To be Black, to be Indigenous, to be a person of color, there are certainly similarities, but there are also lots of differences. And you can't read one book and think, okay, so now I've definitely figured out all the people of color experiences, or even all the Black experiences. And we need to just read a lot of different stories from different communities, from different peoples, rather than just thinking I read diversely. And this book actually made me think about how I talk about seriously planning at all, because what are diverse books? I should say I've been reading Black authors, I'm reading Indigenous authors, I'm reading Latina authors, and so forth and so forth. So lots of food for thought. The final book is called We Will All Be Feminists. This is an anthology by June Eric Udori. She's 20, which I still cannot believe. She's an undergraduate at Duke University, and this is an anthology of 17 authors who are thinking about intersectionality, they're thinking about feminism, how feminism can include everyone, and there are essays by, thinking about disability, there's essays thinking about fat phobia, there's essays thinking about queer and trans identities, there's essays thinking about what it means to be Muslim, and is there space beyond the breaking barriers or breaking norms story when it comes to Muslim stories. There's essays about subterfuge feminism. There's essays about imperial feminism. I had notes upon notes while reading this book. It was incredible. Also when I kind of want copies of all of them, but at the same time, the whole point of public libraries is to be able to be a portal to lots of different kinds of stories. But this is just a really incredible book. It also made me think about when we do equity work. I work in career education, and often I think about, okay, how am I thinking about things with a disability lens or a racialized lens, but how do you actually accommodate or consider or reach people who have multiple identities, who are racialized and may have a disability and maybe queer and have a religious identity, like all of these things. We can't just think about single issues. So those are my 5 books. I had an incredible month of reading. I feel like all these authors who I read this month have just been giving me incredible gifts by sharing their stories, by being vulnerable, by being educators, and I'm so excited to continue this reading into March, because it's not just February that we read Black authors, to also read from men as well, because there's definitely a lot of female stories that I was reading this month. So until next time, those are my 5 books that I read this month. I'd love to hear about what you're reading this month. So please leave a comment below. Subscribe, share, you know the drill. Take care. Bye.